Chapter 4: The Ticking Time Bomb.
Here are the hard truths that we cannot indefinitely run away from. In 2019, the U.S. federal government collected approximately $3.4 trillion from all the different types of taxes currently in existence. In that same year, the federal government spent about $4.4 trillion. Now, the global pandemic from 2020 to 2022 changed all the normal calculations, but for the moment, let us assume we have a traditional, moderately stable economy, for as the pandemic fades, historical equilibrium will return. In 2019, under normal policies, the U.S. tax system failed to collect enough money to cover the government's costs, and thus, the federal government borrowed over $1 trillion to cover its expenses. To borrow money, the government issues bonds, U.S. Treasury bonds, with an annual interest rate of return. One of the largest buyers of U.S. Treasury bonds has been the Chinese government. To date, the federal government has undertaken enormous borrowing, and the Federal Reserve has executed some extraordinary monetary policies, including quantitative easing, a way of printing money by creating currency to buy bonds or securities. Many of these policies continue to be executed within the additional pressures of the post-pandemic world and its aftermath. While recognizing that many of these unusual steps were taken to address hardships and economic impacts related to the pandemic, we still must acknowledge that by the end of 2022, the U.S. government had reached a national debt of about $31 trillion. That sum is greater than the U.S. 2022 annual gross domestic product, GDP, of about $25.5 trillion. This is a scary economic place, as modern developed nations recognize that when a country's national debt surpasses 100% of its GDP, the interest burden can become too great and start to strangle the economy. It is important to recognize that ineffective tax cuts and loopholes work to produce a shortfall in revenue, so that the money to cover the shortfall must be borrowed, increasing our national debt and the money borrowed from the future, your future, to artificially support the economy of today with no viable plan for paying it back. In 2022, the current tax structure collected $4.9 trillion while the government spent $6.3 trillion, creating a yearly borrowed deficit of $1.4 trillion. Additionally, note that government spending is very difficult to cut, because some 70% of the budget consists of major entitlements, defense, and interest on our debt. What can we do? There are too many people and corporations who are not required to pay taxes, too many tax loopholes, and too many legal tax avoidance strategies. The concept of self-declaratory tax filings for individuals and corporations is filled with inherent problems and issues. Think about it. Asking individuals and companies to calculate and declare the taxes that they owe is asking for trouble, and even with salary tax withholdings for individuals, such a system, when coupled with tax code loopholes and complexities, encourages abuse. Add in the many individuals who simply do not file taxes, or who run criminal operations that do not file taxes, and the result is a very large segment of the economy that is not taxed at all. In short, our problem is that the current tax base is just too small, especially when you consider that there is not a political will within Congress to reduce spending, and that pandemic spending is now pegged at over $6 trillion annually. This combination handcuffs the country to a national debt time bomb. There will be a reckoning, but we can't say how soon. Borrowed money must be paid back and taxes must be collected, or else so much money will need to be printed that the value of the dollar will plummet and inflation will rage, as we saw in 2023. Unless we can find a new, fair, and broad tax system to collect the revenue, there is no legitimate path to repayment. This becomes even more urgently true due to necessarily expanded borrowing and spending following the pandemic. If we are reduced to printing more and more money, no matter what sleight of hand the government employs, the future impact on the daily lives of your children will be dramatic. The social contract in our Constitution outlines that the government will tax the people in exchange for spending towards services for our safety and general welfare. But the long and sordid evolution of the laws that dictate which people are taxed and how they are taxed has produced a complicatedly unfair system that is steeped in political favoritism and in the end may still be unconstitutional. This can be clearly seen in many examples, such as in the fact that 55 of the U.S.'s largest companies, including Nike and FedEx, paid no taxes in 2020, while operating with enormous profits. Amazon in 2018 paid no taxes after generating $11 billion in profit. That corporations are not carrying their share of the tax burden and are doing so legally is a sign of a broken system. It is no wonder that many middle and upper middle class earners feel they are being unjustly penalized by bearing a disproportionate part of the tax burden. More directly, this inequity strikes at the very heart of the American dream. Make no mistake, the failure of our current tax structure is breaking the promise that if you work hard, study hard, and stay the course, you will be successful and financially rewarded. As Thomas Kuhn, the great American historian and philosopher who invented the concept of the paradigm shift, stated, "Paradigms must shift when old beliefs become less capable of providing answers to concrete problems, and where, for each solved problem, others appear of even greater complexity."